Ken, good evening and welcome to GB News.
Good evening.
Do you understand the point that I'm making, that GPs have always had, huge regard from their communities, but people are really, Ken, they're genuinely now asking questions. They're basically saying GPs want to get paid, but don't want to work.
So I understand the point you're making. I think that one of the big things that sort of changed, and these changes were taking place long before the pandemic, in terms of different ways of working. So whether it's sort of electronic consultations, telephone consultations, and where needed, of course, patients are seen face to face, that change was happening. All the COVID pandemic is now, it's accelerated that. And now I think, obviously, if a patient wants help, they are given the help and response. But the response is according to what the problem is, and also the convenience of the patient. The patients often don't want to take a whole, half day off if their problem can be solved on the phone or via email. But I think the shift from, say, moving more into a remote way of working or a mixed way of working, I think obviously people notice that change. That's one of the things that's happened.
Well, it might suit GPs. I mean, I fully understand that, work from home, do consultations, cut it down to a 3-day week, still get six-figure money. I can understand it from the GP's perspective. But, the Alzheimer's Society, for example, say there have been 50,000 misdiagnoses, and they put that down to a lack of face-to-face consultations. Can you look us in the eye and tell us that as a GP, you can diagnose somebody with early-stage Alzheimer's on Zoom?
So what happens is that, so for example, if I'm in the surgery, it could be anything up to 50% of the patients you bring in. So anyone with lumps or possible Alzheimer's, or it needs a bit more of a thorough, complicated assessment, they would have to be brought in. This is not about sort of doing things that are not sort of possible to do, but it's about giving the options, for the GP, but also the patient. And clearly, if patients got busy lives and they want their problems sorted out and they want to be phoned on their mobile phone, their prescription sent direct to the chemist, then it's appropriate to do that. But any time a patient needs to be seen, that they are brought into the surgery.
Well, okay. I do get the point that there are people leading busy lives who want, as you say, a new prescription or whatever. I get that. I understand that. But you and I both know in parts of the country, people are having to wait weeks for a face-to-face consultation. Now, I'm not blaming you for the rapidly rising population. That's not your fault. But we have found ourselves with roughly the same number of general practitioners and a much bigger population. So the first debate we've just had is about working practices, and we can agree perhaps to disagree slightly on that. But we need to get more doctors per head of population, don't we?
Well, I mean, that's true. Certainly, there are more doctors being trained, but it takes 10 years to sort of train as a GP. And the key aspects of it, the first element of it is that it's not just the number of the population that's increased, and partly post-COVID is that there are lots of sort of conditions that, patients are now seeking for help, and it's appropriate that they do so. So if their queries, query cancers or diabetes that needs managing, or complexity or other sort of problems, that there's much more people seeking help. And some surgeries have seen a 30-40% increase in demand. And that does have to be met. But obviously there's a certain amount of increase in waiting. And obviously with the hospital waiting list to sort of manage it in that way. But at the end of the day, one talks about the GP, but also now we have nurses, we have physiotherapists, we have pharmacists, all in their own sort of appropriate way can manage these patients. And now we think of a multi-skilled workforce, which I think moving forward is the right way, because to be honest, we'll never have enough GPs for GPs to do everything. But it's just a sort of transition, sort of a more, I'd say a more modern way of working. And that's where we're moving to. But
looking at the numbers, in Germany, there are 10 times the number of GPs per head of population. We're not in a good place here, are we?
Well, I mean, I think that, as I say, certain countries have developed differently, and certainly in Europe, in a sense, they've sort of have a large number of patients that see just the doctor actually undertakes most of the work. But if you take, for example, my practice, we have the variety of professionals. And to be honest, I think that, nurses do get skilled in what they do, as do pharmacists. And if you've got, say, an injury or musculoskeletal problem, you're probably it's better to see a specialised physio than the GP. So we all have our skills. And we've moved much faster in that direction. And I think that's appropriate. It's almost the quality of care we receive at the end of the day, not being over-focused on the GP. It's not, the GP's got enough work to do, but appropriate person for the appropriate skills, I think.
And do you understand, Ken, finally, why people are asking questions now about GPs? Is this just because of the pandemic, or is there perhaps a bit of a disconnect going on now between GPs and their patients?
I understand these sort of anxieties that brought up, but I think in terms of communication, so for example, if somebody phones a surgery and they're directed to the right professional, and also that it is appropriate, there are different ways of contacting GP and receiving help. Before we had paper, now we've got emails and these remote ways working. We shouldn't just have one and not the other. But yes, I think one aspect of it, give the right care, but also keep the satisfaction and confidence together is what you're saying. And I think it's appropriate that we focus on that. And we need to articulate that more, I think.
I think something needs to be done. Ken Aswani, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News.